Here's what we looked at last time right before we left. Oh, there he is. What's going on, Lewis?
I just woke up. David called me and I woke up.
Oye, I can hear it.
I know, I'm tired.
Mm, too much partying,
What
man.
the hell? David said that you called me Ratatouille. What does that mean?
Dave, why you snitching, bro?
Why you roasting though, bro? Come on now. Don't you
I
have to cook
called you Ratatouille because you were cooking last time while we were on the Zoom. That's all. But then I said that's good that you know how to cook. You know, you can take care of yourself. That's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
All right, guys. All right,
You were
so
trying to make tea. Okay, I'll shut up now. Shut up.
all right. Okay, so last time we were trying to calculate how her balances changed, and then also how the minimum payment changes as you continue to make payments, right? So there's this process of you have your balance, you subtract from your balance whatever payment you make, but then whatever's left, then interest is calculated based on whatever is left over, and that's usually how your new minimum payment is generated. So the new minimum payment is always a certain percentage of the new balance. Okay, so just to kind of walk us through here, we had a new balance of 1935 right here in black, and then the um, the person made a minimum payment of 48.39, right? So you can see the subtraction here takes place, and then we have 1887 with 33 cents. Okay. Now that amount, that new balance, well, interest is added to that every month. So the interest that's added is you take the APR, and because that's an annual rate, you have to divide it by the number of months in which it's compounded by. So we divide it by 12. Okay, so you're paying a smaller percentage of interest each month. So then we ended up getting 2705 as the amount of interest that you would pay on your new balance. Okay, so then that takes us back up to 1914. All right, and because 1914 is a smaller amount than 1935, you would expect that the minimum payment also shrinks. Okay, and that's typically normal because now you have a smaller balance. So if every year or every month the new minimum payment is a result of your new balance, it is only about 2.5% of the existing balance. All right, so that's what this 0.0249, that's where that comes from. All right, so basically we answered the first part, right? Because we made her first minimum payment, calculate the minimum payment due for March, right? Then calculate the new balance after Natalie has made her second minimum payment. Okay, so now we use what we got here to then run this one more time to find out what is the new balance with the new minimum payment for the next month. Oh, we got. All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and try that. So all right, so now we start with a balance of 1914 with 38 cents and a minimum payment of 47.67. Okay. All right. So now let's go ahead and say like, okay, she makes the payment, right? So then for us, that'll look like 1914 with 38 cents minus the minimum payment of $47.67. And let's see what that gives us. Okay, so then that brings her balance down to 1866 with 71 cents. All right. Okay, but then this is something that now interest is going to be accruing interest on, right? So now we have to then multiply by the rate, which is 0.172, but because it's monthly, right, we divide that by 12. So then we have to multiply by that kind of monthly rate to find out how much interest is going to be charged this month. Okay, so we should expect that it should be smaller than what we got last month. Last month we got 2705. This month we should expect something less. Okay, so we take 1866.71 and we're going to multiply that by 0.172 divided by 12. That doesn't make sense. Let me see. What happened? Let me try that on a different calculator. Okay, so we had 1866 with 71 times 0.172 over 12. Okay, so let me make sure I got the number right. 1866, 71. Okay, yeah. So then this tells us right here how much interest is going to be added to her account. So we're looking at 26 with 76 cents. All right, so this is our interest or finance charge is what they are starting to call it now, right? So it's the interest, but they also call it finance charge. Okay, all right, so then now we then add this new finance charge to her balance, which will create the final new balance for the month. So 1866.71 plus 26.76. Okay, so then the new balance for this month is now 1893 with 47 cents. $18.93, 47. Okay. All right. And then in order to then find the new minimum payment, what would we have to multiply by? Any thoughts? Okay, so just like we did here in the previous month, the minimum payment is always a percentage of the new balance. So we would then have to simply multiply the new balance by 0.0249, okay, which is about 2.5%. And then that should tell us what the new minimum payment should be. And then of course, this should be a smaller number, right? Just like the finance charge was smaller this month than it was last month by about 30 cents or so, the minimum payment should also be smaller, okay? And that's because you're taking 2.5% of a smaller amount than you did in the previous month, okay? So let's see, 1893 with 47 times 0.0249. Okay, so now the minimum payment is 47 with 15 cents. If we round that. Okay, so now we have this as our new minimum payment. And here is our new balance. Okay. So does that make sense how that works? Just understanding that if you make a payment, um, you're not gonna see like just the subtraction and then your balance, right? Because then the interest gets charged back on top of it. So you might be thinking, well, I sent a $47 payment, but then it only shows up like I only paid about $20. Well, that's because there is a difference there. If you look at what you paid and then the finance charge that they add back on, well, you paid 47, but then they added on 26, right? So it really is like you're only making about $20 towards the balance. You're only making $20 towards the balance, and the rest you're paying the interest. So that's where the trouble comes in, is that like if you're just making those little minor payments, you're paying off mostly interest because you're paying the interest that got charged, but then you've left the balance really high. So then if you leave the balance high, the interest rate on a high balance is high as well. Okay, so that's usually where sometimes it's worth, even if you maybe don't leave as much in your savings, it's like, okay, let me get rid of some of this credit card debt because, oh, in the long term, it'll be cheaper for me than if I save more, but I have all this credit card debt, because in the long run, you're paying more money to the interest. So that's one of those things where it's hard to kind of wrap your head around. It's like you feel poor because you don't have anything saved up because you're paying off your credit cards, but then it's eventually worth it because then you've saved yourself a lot of money in the long term. Okay. All right. So are we good on this kind of process so far? Typically, obviously, this is not something that you do yourself. This is like the bank does it behind the scenes. They have algorithms that do this for every client, and they keep track of it. And then they print out your statement, or they send it through you through an email through your account. And then if you want to verify, well, now you kind of know how to verify. But this just kind of shows you how it's done. Okay. All right. Okay, then it talks about using similar reasoning to the parts in A and B to calculate the balance for May and June. We're gonna go ahead and skip that. Okay, this is kind of a simple process. If anything, it's just time consuming. So we're gonna go ahead and just skip through it. And then it asks to calculate the first 4 monthly finance charges, and why does the pattern of change make sense? Okay, well, if anything, we can take a look at this. We can take a look at that just to kind of analyze. We'll do it with the first 2 months. Okay, just with the first 2 months. So these were the finance charges that they're talking about. It's the 2705. That was the finance charge for the first month, and then the finance charge for the second month here. Okay, and so this would be for part D here. So for the month of March, finance charge of 27.05. For the month of April, we saw a reduction in the finance charge down to 26.76. Okay, so that's good. Okay. And so let's see, the numerical difference between this one and this one, that difference, oh, I put the wrong value, sorry. 27.05 minus 26.76. Okay, so it's a reduction of 29 cents. Okay. I don't know if there's any other kind of particular pattern about this. I know that it has something to do with the finance charge, the rate at which you're paying it. So let me just try something here. So let's see if we took 2705 and multiplied this by the rate, yeah, no, it's not quite the same. Okay, no, that's fine. All right, so if we had the next couple months, then we could tell like how it's decreasing by, but typically it's just a pattern of, increasing size that you're getting a smaller monthly minimum payment. Okay. All right. Okay. Any questions so far then? We doing all right? All right. Let me pull up another problem here. We're gonna skip number 9 because number 9 is asking us to look at spreadsheets, and then it wants us to look at credit card balances after 48 and 60 months, and that's really time consuming, so we're not really going to cover that. So we're going to kind of jump to number 10 and number 11. Okay, so give me a little bit of a time here to pull that up. Okay, cool. So number 9 and 10, basically, those questions were to kind of like build this understanding of like this regularity in balance from 1 month to the next month, and then minimum payment from 1 month to the next month, right? And we've kind of seen that already when we did it manually. So those problems were just like extended versions of that to try to get you to look at it through the lens of a spreadsheet, so you can see that as the months go by, how your balance is getting reduced versus how your minimum payment is also shrinking because you're making progress towards the balance, right? But as you're making progress towards the balance, the interest rate is kicking your balance up just a little bit. So it's like you're only working about half a step towards your goal because interest is working against you. All right. And so then we're introduced to this idea here that there is a minimum payment balance formula, right? So that you can find out what is the balance, right? What would be your balance after you make a certain number of minimum payments, okay? And so the regularity in your calculations in problem 8 through 10, okay, suggests the following formula, okay? So this is something we're given. If R is the APR for a credit card and M is the minimum monthly payment as a fixed percentage of the balance. Okay, so M is also a percentage. So just like in our previous problem, we had rate being 1.72 or 0.172 because that was the APR. But then we also knew that the minimum payment was also a percentage of the balance. So we have these two different rates. Okay, so we're gonna need to utilize those. Okay, so then it tells us here that the product, right, of these two terms should not be rounded in the calculation. Okay, so we don't want to round. Typically, you want to leave the rounding until the very, very end. Okay, all right, but the less you round, the more accurate you can get. Okay, so here's something that we can use, and hopefully we can use it in the next couple problems. All right, and we'll come back to this. Okay, so suppose after a year of college, you have a balance of $4,500 on your credit card, and that with full-time summer employment, you make no more charges. Okay, so you've racked up the card up to $4,500. Assume your credit card has a finance charge of 18%, APR compounded monthly, and that each month you make only the minimum payment of 3% of the unpaid balance. Okay, and so you have an APR of 18%, and each month you're making the minimum payment. The minimum payment is 3% of whatever it is that you owe. Okay, so write a formula that gives the account balance for this situation after n monthly payments. Okay, so something to look at here is that n represents the number of months. Okay, so n minimum payments is just like it's only one payment a month. So n minimum payments also refers to the amount of months. Okay, so really the only two things that we need to really worry about here is, well, what is my initial balance? What is the rate in terms of the APR? What is the M? M is my monthly minimum payment, and then n is the number of months. Okay, so we want to go ahead and write something that we can use. So let's just call this balance here. So balance, this is for part A, by the way. So balance is equal to, okay, it's the initial balance. Okay, so your current balance is equal to now the initial balance that you had, which was the 4,500. Okay, and then we're multiplying that times and then two smaller products inside of that. One plus my rate, the rate was 18%. So we want to convert that down to a decimal. So that's going to be represented by 0.18. Okay, so we have 0.18 divided by 12 because we're doing this as a compounded monthly type of problem. Okay, times 1 minus m. In this case, m is represented by the percentage of the minimum payment that it has to be. So the minimum payment has to be 3% of what you owe. So then this now becomes 0.03. This is the m value. Okay, so 1 minus 0.03. Okay, and then all of this to the n. Okay, so it's a little bit of a tricky formula in the sense that you have, right, these large parentheses, and inside of those large parentheses you have the product of those two terms, and then with the power of n to the outside. Okay, so because we don't know how many months have elapsed, then we just leave it in terms of n. So that's why we have the n variable there. We don't plug anything in for that. Okay, so that's what we have for now. All right, let's see if we could simplify this a bit, because this could turn out to be something that is a little bit cleaner, right? We have a lot of terms here, and this would be kind of a pain to have to do this over and over. So let's see if we can clean this up a little bit. So if we took 0.18 and divided it by 12, that gives us 0.015. So then this could become 4,500 big parentheses 1.015, and then here this is just 0.97. Okay, all of this to the n power. Okay, so maybe if we multiply those products, right? We get something that's not too bad. 1.015 times 0.97. Okay, and that's not too bad, right? Because it's not it's not a decimal that is extending on forever. It actually stops, so we can utilize that 0.98455. Okay, so we'll just call it B for now, B for balance. All right, so then that's the product. And then that's not going to change for us because the APR doesn't change and neither does the monthly minimum percentage, right? So that's a fixed value right there, the 0.98455. Okay, that's something that we can use over and over. But it's nice that we simplified it because now every time we do the calculation, we don't need to plug in everything individually, right? We just know that's the constant number, that's the base for us. Okay. All right, so now we can move on and try to answer a few more questions. All right, so if you are making the minimum payment only, right, which is 3% of what you owe, and remember, it's 3% of 4,500 in this case, so 3% of 4,500. If you were to start making that first monthly payment, right, your minimum payment would have to be $135, okay, because you owe so much, okay. But again, it's on a what do you call it? It's on a yearly scale. Okay, so we'd have to find out, well, how much do you owe that month, and then we'll 3% of that. Okay, so I don't think it would be like $135 payment for just 1 month. Okay, so the balance would be after 30 months. Okay, so for part B here, we have our equation. The balance is going to be 4,500 times 0.98455. And then this time we can change n to the 30th. Okay, that's going to be the balance. Okay, so let's find out. Let's go to, we can do it here actually. All right, so 0.98455 to the 30th power. Okay, and then we take this times 4,500. Okay, so after 30 months, your balance is now only 2820 with 63 cents. Okay. All right. What will the balance be after 5 years? Okay. Well, in that case, it's just a change of language type of problem. It's C. Okay. So after 5 years, well, we're looking at 12 months, right, per year. So that's a minimum of 60 payments right there. Okay. So we want B equal to 4,500 times 0.98455 to the 60th power this time, right? Because we need 5 years is equal to 60 months. All right, so 0.98455 to the 60th power times 4,500. Okay, so it's dropped down to 1776, or no, 1767, 98. Okay, so making minimum payments for 5 years and she still hasn't paid off the balance, right, for something that she bought 5 years ago, right? So you can imagine that's kind of ridiculous, right, that you buy something and unless it's like a car, right, you probably shouldn't be paying it back 5 years after. That's kind of bad money management, just in general terms. So that's the problem with just those minimum payments, is that there's so much interest that you're being charged that you're barely making any dents. Okay. And then it asks you to determine how long it will take for you to reduce your balance to less than $50. Okay, well, let's think about how we would set that up, right? For part D, okay, if we know that we're going to utilize $50 is kind of like the standard that we want to meet, that we want to get to. Well, the only thing that we're looking for is how long, right? How long will it take? And how long will it take will be determined in months. So we're basically going to be solving for n. Okay, so if we go back to this equation here, right, and we want the balance to be less than 50, well, we can probably set it at equal to 50, because then it'll essentially tell us like how many months it'll take for us to even get to 50. And then obviously it'll have to be just a little bit longer than that. So if we set the balance equal to 50, equal to 4,500 times 0.98455 to the n, and n is the thing that we're solving for this time, okay? Now, since n is the variable and n is also in the position of being an exponent, then this is where we're gonna have to use some log. Okay, so first let's try to get the 0.98455 to the n by itself. So what we want to do here is divide both sides by 4,500. Okay, these will cancel. Let's find out what 50 over 4,500 is. Okay, 0.011. You know what? I'm just going to leave it as 5 over 45, or 5 over 450. And then if we divide top and bottom by 5, I'm just going to try to leave this as a fraction for now so that I don't lose any values to the rounding. So if we divide the top by 5, that leaves us with 1. If we divide the bottom by 5, that's 90. Okay, so I'm just going to leave it here in terms of this fraction. Okay. All right, in this case, you might be wondering, like, do we use log or do we use ln? Remember, ln was only utilized when we had e, and in this case, we don't have e, so we can just go ahead and apply like a regular log. So we want to apply a log to this side, okay? And we want to apply a log to this side. When that happens, remember that this gives you now log of 1 over 90 is equal to log of 0.98455. And then the value of n, right, the n, now you are allowed to bring this down here to the front, right? So now it's n times the log of 0.98455, and then you can remove the n from the power. So you're solving for n. Remember, that's how many months it's going to take for us to get to this point that we want to get to. So now we can go ahead and divide both sides by the log of 0.98455. All right, and so the log of this value is going to eliminate, and you're left with n. Okay, so here we're going to get an approximate value, and we can go ahead and find this using Desmos because it's a little bit more accurate calculator. So let's find it. Log of 1 over 90. So log of 1 over 90. Okay, and then this is divided by the log of 0.98455. And so that shows us right there that n is 288, basically 289 months. Okay. So 289 months. Right? So imagine now it's like, okay, well, how long is that in years? 289 divided by 12, you're looking at 24 years, okay, to pay off a $4,500 balance by only paying in minimum payments.